Standing between two mounds and placed in great isolation stands a church dedicated to Edith of Polesworth, who was once the sister of one Edward the Elder. St Edith's Church is approached by travelling down a long and winding country lane that runs close to the River Dee. The mound close by was once the site where the ancient castle of Shocklach once stood. Now there are no other ancient buildings within sight of St Edith's, making this one of the most obscure churches across Cheshire. Originally this church was in the possession of St John's College in nearby Chester, but following the dissolution, both the rectory and the chapel of St Edith were granted to Sir Henry Fanshawe of London. Now so isolated is this church that in the year of 1921, when the new Ordnance Survey maps were being compiled, the people compiling it decided not to even name the church and simply put a tiny little cross on the map. Sitting here, I have to say that it is one of the quietest churchyards that I've ever been in since filming here in Cheshire. Built in the 12th century by the lord of the manor, it's believed that the church was completed by no later than 1150 AD. However, it's thought that the original foundations are much older, with some believing that the original building was erected as early as 985 AD and put in charge of Wulgar the priest, owner of the manor of Caldicot. Now, one very positive result about St Edith's being so isolated is that any would-be restorers couldn't find the church. Thus, the church has been preserved almost intact since the 12th century. Now, the exterior of this building has very few refinements except for this beautiful and noble Norman door here on the south side of the church. Built using irregular sandstone blocks, this doorway is believed to have been constructed around the year 1150 AD. With a semicircular arch with chevron and cable decorations, the arch extends downwards below the current ground level, indicating that the original floor would have been at least 18 inches below the present level that we see today. But how do we come to this conclusion? Well, we just take a look at some of the facts. You'll notice how low the doorway seems, and on one of the doors at the bottom, the hinge is almost touching the floor. But the deciding factor is when you look underneath the Victorian wooden flooring, there's a huge gap going back down to the original surface. As for the church doors, well, these are ancient too, made from heavy timber studded with iron fittings. There's no doubt that many people have passed through these doors over the centuries, and I just wonder who those people really were. Now, unlike many other churches across Cheshire, St Edith's doesn't have a bell tower or a clock. However, it does have a bell cot with 2 bells and a section where you can see where the ropes or the chains were pulled. Still a very effective way of ringing those bells. Like many ancient churches across Cheshire, St Edith's has its own medieval stone cross. Standing here facing the Norman doorway, this cross has, like other crosses, been stumped. It was during the 17th century that an Act of Parliament was passed known as stumping, which meant every stone cross had to be cut down to a required height. The Puritans certainly didn't like stone crosses across the churchyards of Cheshire and beyond. In the 17th century, St Edith's was to become the burial place for victims of the plague of 1625. The church records include many entries about the burials of such people, but two stand out in particular. Now this particular entry within the registers relates to one John and Elizabeth Handley, two children who died and were buried here at St Edith's. The entry reads as follows. 1625. John and Elizabeth Handley, children of John Handley the elder, fell both sick upon Friday the 23rd of September, and the aforesaid John the son deceased upon Sunday the 25th of September around the time of our service. And by reason he died so suddenly, and having red specks found upon him, he was supposed to have died of the plague. He was therefore carried to the church upon a drag by his mother Ellen Handley and Randall Gilbert, his half-brother, and was buried in the churchyard without service, bell ringing, or any other ceremonies. Just a few days later, John's sister Elizabeth was also to succumb to the plague. Her entry read, Elizabeth Handley, spinster, deceased upon Tuesday the 27th of September, and because she too had red specks found upon her and some sore under the arms, she was likewise suspected to have died of the plague and was buried in her mother's croft near the orchard upon Wednesday the 28th of September. However, on Monday the 3rd of October, Elizabeth was taken up again out of her grave and brought to the church upon a drag by her half-brother Randall Gilbert. He buried her near to his brother John Handley the younger. Well, what a sad and tragic account of the passing of both John and Elizabeth Handley at such a young age, taken by the plague of 1625. However, their memories will live on for many centuries to come.